Hi guys, it's Kevin, and in this video series what we're going to do is we're going to examine a little more deeply into really the nature of EMFs. Now what EMF stands for is it stands for electromagnetic field, and this is really a subject that's been kind of near and dear to my heart, especially really over the last few years with all the battles that I've had with chronic Lyme disease. And what I really found was that in order for me to get to this place to where I am today, this is something that I really needed to deal with in my own personal living space. And this is also something that I think we don't pay enough attention to in the health community today. Now I'm going to be looking at this from really a couple different perspectives. Now the first perspective we're going to look at is really examining the nature of EMFs and looking at it from the perspective of what we currently believe out there, what we currently believe in electrical engineering and physics today. And what we're going to find if we go much deeper into the foundation of that, what we'll see is that really the foundation of electricity and physics today it's based on relativity. It's based on really Einstein's world of thinking. And really what that comes down to, it's really based on inertia. And that's really important to see, because really our definition of inertia is it's really a resistance to change, to changing motion. There's a resistance element to that. And what I want to do is I want to go to the direct source of where that resistance begins. And this might really give us a much deeper picture of kind of what we're dealing with here as far as really the nature of electricity and where it comes from. So we're going to be looking at things from that perspective, but at the same time, I want to introduce a new perspective to you guys. I want to kind of give you guys a new way to kind of think about this, because the perspective I have with really the nature of electricity and where the electromagnetic field comes from is really radically different than what we've been currently taught in schools today. So we're going to be looking at it from that perspective as well. So we're going to be kind of jumping around here, and I'm going to try and do it in a way that's not confusing and kind of make sure that you guys can see what we currently believe and actually see that there might be something much bigger going on in the background here. So now, in order to do that, I also have, if you look down here to the right of your screen, you'll see what I've created here. It's actually what I've called an EMF pollution generator. Now, what this unit is going to do is it's going to actually essentially simulate all of the 4 key variables that make up the term EMF. And we're going to discuss those in a minute, but this pollution generator is really going to simulate that. And if you take a look at it here, you can see you've got a string of lights here at the top. It's on a switch, and it's also on a dimmer switch. So we're going to examine that on what's going on there. Down here on the bottom left, you can see there's a wireless router. So it's going to be emitting wireless signals. And over here to the right, you can see we've got some dirty electricity filters. We've got a switch on some relays. And this is going to be doing a number of different things here. It's going to essentially kind of simulate all the kind of the 4 key variables that we need to look into that make up what we call EMF. So also you can see down at the bottom here, you can see there's a whole bunch of meters. Now these are all meters that I've kind of collected over the years. You can see I got some multimeters, I got some oscilloscopes here, I've got some dirty electricity metering, I've got some electric field meters, I've got some wireless meters as well. So I got a lot of stuff here that we're going to be using to kind of show you really what's going on here. So like I said, we're going to be looking at this from a couple different perspectives. We're going to be looking at EMFs based on what we currently believe, which is based on kind of a relativistic foundation. And we're also going to be looking at something completely new, which is where I would say takes us to something that's truly universal. It's not relativistic anymore. It's something that goes much deeper than this. So that's the direction I'm headed, but at the same time, we need to currently look at what we currently believe. So we're going to kind of be bouncing between a couple different worlds here as we go through this. So not only that, I'm also going to be doing another video playlist along in parallel with this. And that video playlist is going to be all about really structured water philosophy, is what I call it. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because I think there's really a disconnect here between how really the artificial electromagnetic radiation that's in our environment today and how it actually impacts the body, how it affects the body. So the electromagnetic radiation in the environment, the outside environment, has to interact within something that's inside of us. And for me, that medium that is responsible for that is water, because water makes up 70% of the entire body. And I think this mysterious fluid is really underappreciated. And it is an electric substance. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about kind of what I know about this subject. And we're going to be tying it into what might be going on with the electromagnetic radiation in the environment. And you might be able to see that we're going to be kind of making a new link here. Because when we look at structured water, we look at structured water philosophy, we kind of have to look at Masaru Emoto's work and his involvement with really the nature of human perception, really the nature of the human mind, and how this is directly connected to water. And I think that's also a missing link. The missing link being, how does the mind connect into the body? What's the connection there? So we're going to be looking deeply into that as well, and we're going to be kind of looking back on kind of where Rene Descartes left off, because he was the first one to kind of propose this to the world, that the mind and the body, there's a subtle distinction between them here, and this is still not understood in science today. And in my opinion, and a lot of the research and the work that I've done is showing that 100 years ago this was taken much further, and it was taken much further by someone that was here by the name of Nikola Tesla. And he was looking at this from a completely different perspective than we have today. And his perspective, I think, is that really fundamentally, if we want to get to the true source of what electricity is, it's sourced from the mind. And I think that's exactly where he was going, and he didn't get very far. And that's what I mean when I say we're going to be looking at the nature of EMFs from kind of two different perspectives. The first being relativity, and the second being really the source of where electricity might truly come from and where it's truly unified within space, within the space element. So we have to bring that kind of that fifth element into play here. So there's a lot going on here, I know, and I just kind of wanted to kind of do this video to kind of just set everything up so you can kind of get a direction of where I'm going, because I think this is important to cover because of what's really happening in the world today. If we look at this pandemic that we're in today, we all currently believe there's some kind of infective agent out there, and I think there is truly something out there, and what it is and what's really going on, I don't think we've come to realize that yet. I think this is a really deep subject that I think we got to go much deeper into this to kind of get an idea of what could be going on here. And personally, I do have some theories on this, and it comes back to what I said earlier about what our current science is fundamentally based upon, which is relativity, which is inertia. And inertia is essentially this resistance element, this resistance to change that seems to come from somewhere. We don't really know where it comes from. And really the grand theory that I've had here and with everything that's going on in the world is that this infective agent, we'll call, that seems to be, crippling this entire planet. What this might truly be is really a disease of inertia. Now, I know this is kind of a different way of looking at this because really, like I said, what inertia is, it's resistance to change. And we may have an infective agent in the background here that it may have a deeper purpose here that we haven't been able to get to, which is essentially trying to break us out of that resistive element and where that resistance comes from. And I have some theories on that. I know we're kind of getting deep into this, but we need to. And the source of that kind of resistive element here might come within the human mind. And it might come in from really the individual nature of our human mind, which is what we could refer to as the ego. And that might be the true source of this resistive element that we're dealing with. And if we look at this infective agent that we're dealing with today, there might be a deeper purpose behind why it's here. And it might be trying to kind of break us out of this resistive space that we're in. So we're going to leave it at that. I know we're kind of maybe going too much information in this first video, but it's important to see this, because I think with a lot of the work that René Descartes was bringing to us back in the 1600s to kind of set things up, and then kind of where our electrical science was going 100 years ago, and it didn't involve that ego. There was something truly universal here that I think our electrical science was moving towards, and it completely got diverted away from that into the world of relativity, and we've been kind of moving in that direction ever since. And what I'm trying to do is to kind of take the bus and take the boat and kind of steer it back to essentially where we were going 100 years ago, and give you guys a new way to kind of think about that. So that's what we're going to be doing here with these video series that I'm going to be doing. The first one being this one here, which is really the nature of EMFs. We're going to be kind of really going deeply into this. And on the flip side, we're also going to be looking into structured water philosophy, because there's a lot of stuff that we need to cover there to see the connection between the mind and the body, and the connection between really electricity and really the physical body, and giving us kind of some new things to think about there. So having said all that, going back to kind of the basics of this video here, really what this video is about EMFs. And if we look at EMFs, really there's kind of 4 key building blocks involved here. Now I'm kind of display them kind of one by one, because it's important to kind of go through each one of them and kind of give a basic description, so you can kind of see first off kind of what we're dealing with here when we're dealing about what we say. Really, when we say electromagnetic field, really what truly is that made of? This is kind of the question that we should be asking here. And really we can kind of break that down to kind of 4 key components. Now the first component here is actually what's called the electric field. Now this is one that I'm probably most passionate about, because essentially when we're looking at the nature of electricity, this is almost where it begins. Because when we look at the electric field, what it is actually, it's actually sourced from an electric charge, mainly a positive electric charge is what we look at in electrical engineering world. So this electric field energy seems to kind of, it's sourced from the positive charge, which could be referred or could be connected to the proton. So the proton and the atomic nucleus, if we look at it, the proton is actually in the center. So this electric field energy seems to kind of project, and it kind of projects from the center of that. So with this electric field, really what we have to bring into the picture is really the structure of the atom itself. So we're really getting into the nature of what an atom is. And we have to also ask the question, do we actually have an accurate model of what we're dealing with here? Now, this kind of takes you to, the structured water philosophy that I've done with part 1. You're going to see that I have a different picture on this. And if my picture is accurate, this essentially changes everything. So the first one is the electric field. This is really essentially sourced from essentially electric charge. Electric charge seems to be kind of primary here. And it really is primary in pretty much all of our science today. Electrical engineering being one of them, and essentially physics. And if we look at physics, we look at, the best model that we have out there today in physics. It's based on our standard model of particle physics. And if you look at this little diagram here, you can see there's a number of different particle fields that are involved in essentially simulating the nature of the physical world. It all comes from this. And if we break this down a little bit further, you can see that really fundamentally they're just made of it's all made of electric charge. So the second component that we have here is actually what's called the magnetic field. So the magnetic field, this is something that I don't think is at all understood really in this world today. I think it's really a mysterious kind of field of information, might be a better term to use here when we're dealing with the magnetic field, because that's exactly what I think we're dealing with here. It's actually a field it's an information field is what we're dealing with here with the magnetic field. And it has potential, clearly. If we look at the magnetic field in the electrical engineering world, we know that it has the capacity to essentially do physical work on systems. And really what a magnetic field is, it's actually generated from essentially this electric charge component when it's in motion. So when this electric charge essentially starts to kind of vibrate, it produces the magnetic field. So this is very important to kind of see too, because the magnetic field really, it ceases to exist if electric charge essentially just disappears. If there's no electric charge that's harmonically vibrating, there's no such thing as a magnetic field. So this is another key component involved in this electromagnetic field here. And the electric field and the magnetic field, clearly you can see that they work together. So the electric field, it's actually sourced from an electric charge. And when that electric charge essentially starts to vibrate, it produces a magnetic field. So these are two key variables involved in when we do an EMF assessment. And when we get down here to this Emf Pollution Generator, I'm going to show you exactly both of them. And we're going to see both of them on how they actually work in action. Now, the third one is actually what's called dirty electricity. Now, this is a term that's been around the EMF world for quite a while. And really what dirty electricity is, it can be considered as essentially a distortion to the normal electric current that's happening. Now, this distortion that I'm talking about here actually happens when we use, essentially, if you look at this pollution generator here up at the top, I'm going to be replacing all of these bulbs with LEDs. Now, an LED, when you actually power up an LED, it doesn't use the incoming electric current waveform. It doesn't use that. We actually have to take that incoming waveform and we actually have to change it. And we have to essentially rectify it so that we can use something closer to more of a DC electric current to power up this LED. Now, when we do that, when we actually take the incoming electric current waveform that comes into our home and we put it through an LED, that's actually when we can actually see all of this dirty electricity being generated. And what this dirty electricity is, it's actually just it can also be looked at as harmonics. So if we look at the incoming electric current waveform that comes into our home, it's actually cycling itself about 60 times a second. So this change that we're seeing here in dirty electricity, it actually produces a cascade of different harmonics, is what we'll call. And these harmonics are actually essentially just multiples of the incoming kind of electric current waveform that's coming into your home. And what's coming into your home, if you live here in North America, it's a cycle it's a waveform that oscillates essentially at 60 times a second. And if you're over in Europe, you might see that it's actually 50 times a second. But really what we're dealing with is that essentially there's an electric current waveform that comes into our home, and it's oscillating at a specific frequency. And when we use this to power up essentially kind of non-linear type of loads like an LED or a dimmer or maybe a laptop or a computer, any of these things, they don't actually run directly on this 60 hertz cycle. They don't. And there's something that we need to actually use to essentially change the incoming signal. And when we change the incoming signal, that's when we actually see kind of an explosion of all of these harmonics that are produced on that, essentially that same signal. And that same signal is what actually, it ends up radiating throughout all the wires in your home. And this can be a serious problem, especially once we start getting into the higher frequencies. Because when we get higher frequency signals on these types of wires that are in our walls, they don't tend to want to stay on the wire. There's something that's actually called the skin effect, where the electromagnetic radiation signal tends to want to just propagate off the wires. And in some cases, this is exactly what we're seeing. And this can be potentially, harmful for health and well-being. So we need to look at this, and we're going to be looking at this Emf pollution generator, and we're going to be actually showing you, I'm going to be simulating some of this stuff so you can actually see it. So just consider this, a very short introduction on what we're dealing with here, and in the next videos to come, because I'm going to be treating each one of these 4 variables in a separate video, so we can actually see kind of better what's going on here. So really the last one here, number 4, is actually what's called as the wireless electromagnetic radiation. So it's something that is in the air, essentially. It's not something that stays on a wire or a conductor. So when we look at the electric field and the magnetic field, this is something that is not essentially bound to physical wires and conductors, right? It can be. If you look at all the wiring in your home and the wiring that's on this Emf pollution generator, you can see, we're going to be able to see this electric and this magnetic field component working on these wires. But what we also need to see here is that this system is not essentially bound to just physical conductors and wires. This is something that can actually be radiated off into the air around us, right? I mean, this is obvious when you look at, sending a signal from a cell phone tower to your phone, right? Obviously that antenna is kind of sending that signal out through the air, and you're able to receive it on your phone. So this is what I'm referring to when we're dealing with wireless electromagnetic radiation, or another term we can actually call it light. This is another way to describe this too, because essentially what light is, it's actually just a play of the electric and magnetic field, right? So the wireless electromagnetic radiation that we're going to be seeing here, it's something that's radiated from it's radiated from an antenna source. So if we look down here at this pollution generator, you can see down here at the bottom left, it's a wireless router that I've got here. So this is what I'm going to be using to kind of show you how this wireless radiation gets essentially, how it propagates outwards into the space. And we're going to be able to measure that and kind of show you, what's going on here and kind of what might be happening in most of your environments without you really being aware of it. So this wireless radiation component, it's essentially when the electric and the magnetic field components, they're essentially working in harmony with each other, right? And they kind of travel through the air. And again, it's important to see that the electric and the magnetic field, it's not just essentially, it can happen on a conductive material, but it can also happen, it can be radiated through the space as well. So really these are the 4 key components that we're going to be looking at. So I just kind of wanted to do this quick introduction video with you guys to kind of show you, what my plan is and what I want to accomplish here, what my intent is, and what I want you guys to kind of see. And there's, I think, something much deeper going on with really the nature of electricity that we haven't been able to see yet. And that's kind of where I want to take you. And it's going to take us into really a new dimension of space that really doesn't exist yet in science. So I kind of hope you guys join me on this journey. And again, I would appreciate it if you guys kind of like and subscribe to this channel. And again, thanks for watching.